Hello and welcome to From the Rookery. Still in pre-season training, ready for the ramp up to the big day next Saturday. My name is John, and as we start our 15th season tonight, I'm joined here by DCW.
Hello.
And Michael.
Afternoon, evening, even.
Yeah. The sun is just setting. We thought we'd have a bit of a release of all the things that have been going through our heads over the last couple of months about who Watford are, where they are, and what's going to be happening this season. I don't think you'd call it a season preview, but we're just going to talk about things because, well, it's been an unhappy sort of couple of seasons on many, many levels. We were a year on since Watford fans had the opportunity to speak to Gino and to Scott, and, well, I don't think things have shifted a huge amount. But we find ourselves at the moment with a club that, on the last set of published results, we're losing £500,000 a week. It's clear that substantial investment from our owner in the first team is all but dried up. We are dependent on selling 2, if not 3 assets every single summer to keep the wheels turning. And, well, for whatever reason why, the club offered 5% of its worth to investors to try and raise £17.5 million, a crowdfunding exercise. Mike, did you buy anything?
I absolutely did not. No, that didn't tickle my fancy. And yeah, I mean, the reason we wanted to get together was try and get our heads around the situation, because you explain it there, John. There's sort of a championship club losing a substantial amount of money every week, relying on selling players to keep going. That isn't necessarily massively out of the ordinary, I don't think. That is how football clubs, certainly below the elite, seem to be run. But it doesn't anywhere near come close to telling the story really about Watford, does it? You could easily sort of try and compartmentalise it and say every club loses money, every club sells players to survive, and on you go. It doesn't really feel like that's the situation at Watford. You mentioned last year we spoke to Gino and Scott. Have things changed since then? I'd argue they have, but actually they've just got worse. There's been no real further communication of any note from those guys. Scott's gone to ground almost entirely for reasons which we might discuss a little bit later on. And as you alluded to there, John, the state of the playing squad as we speak, just over a little more than a week out before we played our first league game against Millwall, is demonstrably worse than it was last year, and it was crap last year. So in terms of trajectory, that trajectory is very firmly downward. And I guess the question is, why? What's going to happen next? And how much further downward is it going to go before we can expect to see it tick up again?
But how do we get here, do you think, Dave? What are the stages for us to find ourselves in this position?
We're 12 years into the Pozzo era. 12 years since Gino and his dad rocked up and bought the club for not that much money. And we are, if not in the same place that we were when they bought us, maybe even a bit worse off.
Well, definitely worse, because we owe them, 50-60 million quid. They want that money back. There wasn't that level of debt when they arrived, so there is no question that we are, in balance sheet terms, worse off.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, I was talking more in terms of the playing staff, which I think we are probably worse, because we're going into, when they bought us, we just finished in the top half. Maybe was it even top 10? It was certainly top half, wasn't it, under Sean Dyche? And if we get a top half finish this season, at the way it's going, I think everyone will be very surprised and be very pleased. We're heading for a relegation battle as things stand, I think, and it's been a sort of slow, depressing decline over the last few years, really, hasn't it? We had the highs of the journey to the Premier League. I mean, that was, I think you can basically split it up into 4 phases, right? If you want to get Marvel about it. You had...
Well, we know who Dr. Doom's going to be anyway.
So you had like 2012 to 2015. The first phase was building to get into the Premier League. It was utilising the loan market, utilising the network. It was throwing as much as you could at it to get us up, which they achieved in memorable fashion in 2015. Then the next phase, you've got 2015 promotion, stabilisation. We consolidated ourselves in the Premier League. We bought some impressive players. We were, for a time, as good as we've ever been, really, relatively speaking. And then came the cup final and the fallout, and that's where you enter the next phase, and it's where everything starts to twist and turn and fall out of control, and Gino loses control and can't really get it back again. We didn't strengthen the squad properly in the summer after the cup final. We then had an unprecedented season of disruption with COVID, and we went into that moment in COVID having just had a really good period of form, but the last game before COVID was that game against Crystal Palace, which we lost. At the time we didn't know it, but we've since learned that a number of the players, including Sarandini, had COVID for that game. We went into that break like that, and we came out of it with no momentum, a damaged squad, and we all know what happened. We ended up getting relegated. But then we squandered, crucially, we managed to get back up, and then we squandered the chance of retaining our status by having such a pitiful attempt at staying in the Premier League. So that really takes you up to the end of the third phase, really, that it's that relegation, it's that second relegation from the Premier League, and then the fourth phase is what we're still in now. The Premier League disappearing over the distance and becoming further and further away, not really any longer being an attainable, realistic target for us, and everything else that comes with that, the loss and the lack of parachute payments, the need to sell all your players, and the inability to bring in players of a similar quality. And we're now at the position where we have an owner who for whatever reason appears to be disinterested in investing in the levels that he was before, probably wants to sell, but also doesn't want to sell for any less than he wants to sell, which is his right, but puts us in a difficult position. As Mike said, we've got a demonstrably poor squad. We've got a rookie manager who we all hope does really well, and we're all behind, but again, it's a risk going into this season. So we are at a low ebb. There's lots of reasons to be concerned, and at the moment it just seems precious little room for optimism and hope, to be honest.
I think you're right about that relegation during COVID. It was a big thing, and I just think it might have hindered us a little bit more, purely from the point of view of we couldn't move on a couple of players who we needed to move on quick enough because the market was stagnant. No one was going to spend the money maybe Gino wanted for certain players, and we ended up holding on to someone like Etienne Capoue another 6 months, where in every other relegation it would have been fine and someone would have put some money towards. Andre Gray might have even got sold on a normal relegation, but it wasn't a normal relegation, and that sort of put us all massively on the back foot for when it came to, well, that promotion that we did win. The fact that money wasn't invested in there was probably the first sign, for me at least, that it had hit us even harder than we had thought it might have done. Yes, we went down and we got promoted, but somewhere along the line they weren't then wanting to invest at that point, and they haven't done since.
I think it's actually important to talk through that Dave's just done there and what you've just done there, John, just to contextualise where we're at, because I think whilst everyone, well, I can't speak for anyone apart from myself, I'm exceptionally worried, exceptionally sort of not gloomy, but yeah, just concerned about what the future holds. And Dave talked about the Premiership disappearing over the horizon. Well, it feels to me like there's a battle for survival, let alone promotion. But I think it is important to contextualise it. That COVID season was a sliding doors moment where effectively we fluffed our lines. We should have been relegated by a mile by some of the performances we put in, but it ended up being right up until the last minute in that game against Arsenal. We were still in it, and had we won that game at Palace on the back of that stunning win against Liverpool, it would have been oh so different, and the conversation we've been having now would be completely different. And we might be doing this from Philadelphia on a pre-season tour in the Premier League Cup or something. So the point I'm making with that is, I don't think that Gino Pozzo has done this on purpose. I don't think he is in the business. I definitely think he's been in the business of making money, and I think there might be associates and there might be people in the club who do make money and do well out of being attached to a football club. He wanted and still wants Watford to be successful. As it slipped out of his hands and it slipped out of our hands, it's proved increasingly hard to achieve that. And I think a lot of the things that concern us now we're almost certainly still happening in the Premier League seasons, because Gino Pozzo is still Gino Pozzo. He still operates the way he operated then as he does now, and I think it's okay when you're in the Premier League. You've got Premier League money, you've got Premier League signings coming in, you've got the cash flow is different. The whole day-to-day operation is massively different, and it probably covers a multitude of, for want of a better word, sins. As the Premier League disappeared over the horizon, the ability to stay competitive, the ability to react, to be nimble enough to transform the way you run the club into something that worked for that particular situation has utterly failed, to the point we're at now, where hopefully the accounts will show a slightly rosier picture, that we're not losing $500,000 a week. You'd like to think that since those came out, costs have been cut accordingly. But ultimately, how do you end up in a situation where you go from the highs that we were talking about to the lows that we're now talking about? You know, we keep our ear to the ground. We hear things. You're told stuff. Some stuff secondhand. But to be perfectly blunt, I've heard enough stuff about situations arising at the club on a regular basis that are really, really concerning. That is not practice that you'd expect, not a situation that you'd expect to find a business or a football club in. If you add all that sort of that worrying incidents, the bits and bobs and you can't, everyone sort of tells stuff in a different way. Everyone's got a different potentially axe to grind, or puts a different slant on it, overplays some stuff, underplays other. But it's come from so many different angles and so relentlessly that it's impossible not to paint a picture of a club that is. I can't say it's dysfunctional, because if they put a football team out on the pitch, then they're probably doing what they're supposed to.
No, I mean, that's the bare minimum. That's literally the bare minimum of existing as a football club. I think dysfunctional is an appropriate word. From the stuff that we've heard, the conversations that we've had, the reports that you hear, as you say, they come from enough people from enough different angles to know that we have reason to be concerned that this football club, it isn't being run in a sensible, in a sustainable, and even in a professional way at all. So that's the backdrop to the season and to the situation that we're in now. And there's this sort of slight push and pull, and these sort of two ways of looking at it at the moment. On the one hand, we're going to turn up at Vicarage Road from the Stoke game in a few weeks, and we're going to go to Millwall away on the first day, and we're going to have a football team to support, and we're going to enjoy doing that, and we're going to do all the rituals that we normally do. We're going to come to the railway, where we're sitting now recording this, before the games, and go to the Mad Squirrel afterwards and all the rest of it. Hopefully we'll have a fun time, win, lose or draw. That's part of being a football fan, and that'll be what it will be, regardless of whether we're in the Premier League, Championship or below. The other part at the moment, and why I'm feeling quite despondent and feeling quite down, and I think a lot of fans are feeling despondent, down, even apathetic, concerned, all negative words, is because of the backdrop. We know that all is not well. We can feel it, and we know that all is not well. And as you said, it's been a year since we heard from Gino and Scott at that event, and nothing's really changed, and that whole thing really was a shambles in itself. And there is a big feeling amongst certain sections of the fan base that we need Gino Pozzo out. And as we've said before, that is not necessarily a magical solution to all our problems, because who comes next? But that's a different discussion. I'm definitely at the point now where, again, I'll turn up, I'll support the team, and I'll enjoy it for what it is. But I have lost trust, I've lost faith in Gino Pozzo, in Scott Duxbury, and their ability to run Watford Football Club in the way that I want them to.
That's a key point you make, Dave, there about going to the games and turning up and enjoying it, because I feel really sort of confused about my Watford fandom, really, ultimately about what we're supposed to be doing. And what supporting your football club is supposed to be fun. That's what it is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a social event, and you have the highs and you have the lows, you have the ball draws, you meet your mates, you go with family, you go to a new ground. It is supposed to be fun. And every time that Watford pop into my head at the moment, I've got a billion different competing thoughts. Should I even bother going? Is it fun? Questioning myself, is it fun? And then, because I worry so much, and of course the reason you worry so much is because you're invested so much in it, emotionally and financially, unfortunately. And you have to do that to get stuff out of it, otherwise it doesn't mean anything. But I think what I've realised is it's And what's confusing for me at the moment is that I've had to come to terms with there are competing statements that are true. So, as Dave rightly says, I am frustrated and have no faith or trust in Gino Pozzo and his ability to run the football club correctly for the reasons we've outlined. I don't think he's got us to this point on purpose, but once that decline starts, you have to arrest it. And he's been summarily unable to do it. And as that decline has sort of worsened, fallout, the noise has become worse and worse about how it's impacting the club internally. But I'm not going to allow that to stop me enjoying and looking forward to going to a new football a new football season. So it's possible to be disappointed by the owner, but also want the club to do well, and it's possible to do what we'll look to do as much as we can as a supporters podcast, to shine a light in the areas where perhaps stuff isn't going as well as possible. It's possible to do that and to try and root out if there is stuff going wrong, to try and highlight that and share our concerns with it and discuss it. But it's also okay to luxuriate's the wrong word, but to enjoy the good bits that the club does as well, because the community side of things still beats very, very strongly, and there's lots of good work that goes on, and there are good people at the football club trying really, really hard with initiatives, and the family side of things is excellent. But you are allowed to enjoy one, and I'm not telling anyone how to be a football supporter. What this is a self-help session for me to remind myself that yes, you can be critically worried about the future of the football club, but that doesn't preclude me from also looking forward to Millwall away. And so it's important not to get the two muddled up.
I think, Mike, you the minute you started doing your work for Opta, you stopped coming to the pub before games, the home games at least. And I think you're missing a trick, a little bit anyway. But I think what you're saying there reminds me, of course, what Geordie used to always say. He said, we are Watford Football Club, and the Watford bit is the community, the football is the thing that we go and watch every Saturday, and the club is the beast that is running things. But do you think, Dave, is it all 100% at Gino's feet? I know it's very easy to say that because he's the owner, the buck does stop with him. Is there other people who are playing a role or not playing a role?
I think primarily the buck stops with him because, look, he owns the club and he's a hands-on owner in terms of he's around a lot of the time. He's not some sort of distant, sort of silent investor who sits on his yacht somewhere and just lets someone else tick it over. So the buck stops with him, absolutely. He's heavily involved in the financial side of things in terms of transfers and recruitment. His relationship with Moji Bayat is clearly an issue. They addressed it last year at the forum that they had with the supporters, and they tried to sort of explain it away and say, well, he's just an agent that we have dealings with. We speak to a lot of agents. Regardless of whether Bayat is an angel or a devil or somewhere in between, it's clearly not healthy to have a relationship that central to the recruitment, to rely on somebody that heavily. I don't think it's healthy, and there's plenty of reports out there in terms of things that they may or may not have been involved in the past, and they would protest their innocence in all those scenarios, right? But I don't think it's good, and we know enough about that. But you do have to talk about Scott Duxbury as well. He's the chairman and the CEO or chief executive of the football club. As Mike said, he has increasingly disappeared from public view. He, I think, he really came out badly of the whole Rob Edwards debacle. That appeared to be his man, and then Gino dispensed with his services after 10 games, and of course we know what happened with Rob after that. But also, as the accounts tell us, he's being paid best part of £1 million a year. With a football club that's potentially losing as much money as it is, that is alarming. And we haven't heard from him so much. Look, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I don't want to presume to know exactly what's going on, but put it this way: when things were going right, he was very public, and he seemed to be very keen to take his share of the credit, and maybe rightly so, for the success. So he has to also take his share of the blame for everything that's gone wrong, I think, as well.
A year ago at that Gino event, Scott was there as well, and it was billed to be an evening with the owner and the chairman and the CEO. That's only two people, by the way. He was very quiet, he was very subdued for, I think, what Scott normally is, and you might take that because he knew this was sort of the Gino show. And it was only right near the end, he almost felt like he had to say something. and he had to say, like, oh, just to, Watford are a top 30 club now, not we're trying to aim to be the best of the rest. He had to say something in it, but otherwise he was subdued, and it's obvious that that stemmed, and it has pretty much since that Rob Edwards appointment and then sacking.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, and in effect I'll be parroting what Dave said. This is the house that Gino built, and if the foundations of this house prove to be built on sand, then that's down to the leaseholder, who is Gino Pozzo. Scott reports to him. Scott is, as far as we can tell, persona non grata. He's on, and we have to talk about it, and it's unfortunate for Scott because he's a named director and we know what his salary is, which is unfortunate, but it's a big salary. He's a big boy, and you take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that come with it. So unfortunately for Scott, we know how much he's on. We know how Watford are performing as a Championship football club. We also know roughly what we're losing. So for your salary to be in the books at that stage as £950,000 against the backdrop of a club that's losing £500,000 a week, you can kind of understand. Look, if I was in Scott's shoes, I'd want to be protecting my salary. I know what my mortgage is, and I probably need to be on £950,000 a year to pay that. But you have a life, and he has responsibilities, and he won't. This is perhaps being overly cynical, but are you going to rock the boat if you're on the best part of £1 million? Are you going to, how long you want to eat that out for as long as possible? So, is Scott being as effective as he once was? There's an argument there. We don't know. We do not hear from him. We haven't heard from him. We've got to go back to buyout as well. Again, because your question.
But he is. Like you say, he's on £20,000 a week basically, and if you're on £20,000 a week, that's got to make him probably at this point, maybe not a couple of years ago, one of the top earners in the club. And if you're looking at you want to improve the club, could that be spent better?
Well, quite.
It's a question that many fans might be asking.
And a decision for Gino to make. Yeah. So you've got to mention buyout as well. And we talk. Your question was about Pozzo, and is it down to him? Well, he has adjudged this bloke as worthy of being effectively a club employee.
Yeah, and because both of them outside of Watford, possibly inside of Watford, but Gino with his problems in Spain with Granada, and then buyouts problems in Europe with other transfers. There's lots of smoke around the fire.
Yeah, look, I mean, and I don't think we're saying anything that hasn't been said or thought before. I don't think this is revelatory in any shape or form. It's just so disappointing that we're here, and I don't think it had to be this way. And I think that's probably the biggest frustration of it.
Look, and I think the thing we need to say, and we need to be honest about, right, is that supporting a rubbish football team is not unfamiliar to us and to almost all Watford fans. So that's fine. We can deal with that, and we know how to deal with that. And as we said, we'll enjoy the football for what it is. The worst case scenario here is what we need to talk about. Hopefully everything will be okay. Hopefully either we'll turn our fortunes around on the pitch and we'll eke our way back up the table and eventually sort of right ourselves, or Gino will sell up or take on significant investment and we move into a new era, and he can go and say, thanks very much, that was fun for the most part, and hope you enjoyed it and all the best. But the worst case scenario is that at some point we run out of money completely. Gino decides that he wants his money back that he's invested into the club, and just takes it and goes and leaves us with nothing. And that's not a scenario that is unusual in the world of football. It's happened to plenty of clubs,
But not with an owner as involved as him.
Look, I don't know the ins and outs of all the stories of clubs that have tumbled from top to bottom, but there are loads of clubs for various reasons that have gone from the heady heights of mid-table or even above in some cases Premier League football and ended up in League Two or worse. And Bolton, Birmingham, Reading, Charlton, and there's loads more where that came from, Portsmouth. There's loads of basket case examples loads of examples of basket case clubs that have had owners that have lost interest, owners that were never interested to begin with, owners that were absent, whatever. Loads of bad owners, loads of different reasons why. And at the moment, it seems like we've got an owner who's more likely to be bad than good for us in the short and medium term future. So we do need to be concerned about that, and we do need to have our eyes on where this could potentially head. We might just tread water. It might just be a boring season where we finish lower mid-table, we don't go down, we've got nowhere near going up, and it's just back to kind of 2010s Watford. But if it really, really goes bad, we could find ourselves outside the ground with the buckets soon.
And I think it would be a dereliction, personally, of my duty if I didn't agree with Dave. It feels like that the worst case scenario is undoubtedly possible. And the main talk at the moment is, can we survive in the Championship, which in itself is probably bad enough considering the context we provided earlier and how well we did to get back into the Premier League, get back and then slip away again. So the conversation is rightly, can we survive in the Championship? As Dave alluded to there could and potentially is a conversation about whether we can survive full stop. Gino Pozzo is not altruistic. He didn't land upon Watford and think, this is a nice sleepy Hertfordshire village within striking distance of London, I'd like my kids to grow up here and I'd like the community football club to thrive. He's not altruistic. He will want his money back, and he will get his money back. And if that means, and I don't know if this how possible this, but the doomsday scenario obviously is, he's set an enormously high, a ludicrously high, a prohibitively high price for the club. That's why no one's bought it. I'm sure there would be interest in the football club if it was priced sensibly. For example, give me enough to cover my loans and a drink on top and I'll get out of Dodge. It doesn't seem interested in that. Unless he sells, because the club ain't making any money, and any money it does make will be used to break even. And this share issue, that's not being, the money that raised 4 million or so, that is, don't make any bones about it, that will be used to keep the lights on. That is not going to be used for a new striker or even a striker's left leg. That was a digital begging bowl. However you look at the prospectus, that's my take on it anyway. If you take things, we've talked about a spiral out of control that Gino has been completely unable to arrest, as have the team around him. Nani in and out, Scott has been unable to have an impact. As time goes by and the club is having ever diminishing returns on the pitch, that means it's less likely to generate funds. Where's his money going to come from? So if he is owed 50, 60, 70 million quid, where does that money come from? And there's one asset that Watford have, and that's the ground. I don't know about how it would work, but this is me vocalising my worries. He sells the ground, he takes his money, and off he goes. Whether he would do that, whether he would see that as failure and is too proud to do that, potentially. But what we have seen is he's been absolutely unable or unwilling to arrest this decline. And so can he sort of build Watford up to a stage where they're saleable at the level he wants, or that they earn enough for him to take his money out and go without damaging the football club? It just feels incredibly unlikely to me.
No, the money he wants for it, or let's say he seems to want for it, would only come with promotion. Would only come with probably even promotion and a second season in the Premier League. Yeah, he's not going to get it at this point unless someone ridiculous is prepared to put their money in. But I will also point out that in the recent crowdfunding, it said that it's an investment, and you may put money into this, but with every investment, the money you put in might go up in value, it might go down in value. I think Gino's investment has gone down in value, so maybe he won't get the money he wants. The question is, how long will he wait?
I think that whole project was unfortunate. I think that was pitched incorrectly. I don't ever think that was intended for Watford fans to... No. I don't think that's what it was. I think it was pitched as an overseas investment opportunity, cynically, for people with less knowledge about football than us, and it just so happened that they decided to, for some reason, market it as an opportunity for Watford fans to own a piece of their club. Most people saw through it pretty quickly. I stand by my original take that some people will have seen it as a nice chance to give something back. That was unfortunate. The comms around that, it doesn't change anything. What it is another indication that the football club is desperate for cash. That I think it finishes at September. I think was the last chance to.
About 2 months left at this point from the beginning of August.
I'd love to be proved wrong, but it strikes me as they're just looking for money and money quickly. We've just spelled out an absolute doomsday scenario there, and obviously we hope with everything we've got that it doesn't get to that. But I think I'd be wrong of me not to share my worries in that regard, because I think I certainly don't want to sensationalise things, and I don't want to panic anyone. This is me catastrophising potentially and thinking about my darkest possible thoughts about Watford. But if you look at everything, if you overlay everything that we know, the decline, the lack of investment in the playing squad, all the stuff that we've heard on the periphery, all the noise about this and that, and the way people have been treated, the way the lack of money here and stuff like that, it all adds up to the club going in a particular direction exceptionally quickly.
I was listening to the last podcast that we had on the feed, one about the new book from the Watford Treasury, which documents the entire decade of the 90s. I thought it was an excellent listen. I've got the book. The book arrived today on my doormat, and I'm looking forward to reading it. But it does strike me that it's particularly appropriate that they've released the book at this time. I don't know whether it's by design or coincidence, but there are a lot of parallels, I think, with our situation from in that decade to where we are now. If you said, you look at where we were in the early 90s, so we come out of the First Division in the late 80s, Taylor's long gone, it's become abundantly clear that we are no longer capable of getting into the top division or the Premier League, and we enter a period of drifting around from manager to manager with an owner that was unpopular, waiting for a Messiah-like figure to come back and save us in terms of the owner and a new manager. And I think that's kind of where we are now, really. We're going to drift around this season and in the seasons coming, whether that be in League One or the Championship or wherever. We're definitely in a down period, and if you want to be philosophical about it, that is football, with the exception of the very, very elite clubs, and even there, in their own ways, they have this, but with the exception of those guys, football is cyclical. You do have your moment in the sun, and you have your moment where you have to take the bad stuff. That's not me trying to be a quote-unquote happy clapper or to try and ignore any of the issues that we've spoken about. Absolutely, they are front and centre of my mind. But I think perspective is important, if for nothing else, to stop yourself from going mad.
Touching back on the Gina thing, what I think was amazing for someone who invested in football, and his family have invested in football for many, many decades now, is there was never an exit strategy. Most football investments, investments in any business, there's an exit strategy, and he clearly hasn't got an exit strategy. He just wants to play Football Manager. I've said it before. He's been playing Football Manager his entire adult life with Udinese and with Watford. He doesn't have an exit strategy.
Right, well, in that case, we need Miles to help him out, and quickly. He needs to sort of write in a Watford patch for 24-25. But I think Dave makes a really, really good point, because it does sound doom and gloom. And it's interesting that Dave mentions the 90s, and I think one of the guys from the Treasury, when talking about the book, says that the down times feel like being there is a bit of a badge of honour.
Yeah.
And we were there. You and I were there. David there to a lesser degree, in spirit later on. And it was actually, there's a lot of fun to be garnered from literally just supporting your team. There was no expectation in for the majority of that decade. We got relegated, then we went back up again. So, and then of course it culminated in the semi-final, in the playoff final at Wembley. So I guess that's shows how lucky we've been as Watford fans. Really, we talk about this terrible decade. Oh yeah, we won Division 3 and won a playoff. Got promoted twice in 2 years with an incredible comeback from our greatest ever manager. Scored an overhead kick at Wembley. But the down days in the 90s were bleak. There were 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 in the ground. We weren't winning. We weren't. The games were dire, but it was fun. And I'm not saying that you have to earn your spurs or you have to earn your badges as a Watford fan by sitting through a load of crap to enjoy the good times. But as Dave said, you do need to get on with going to the football and enjoying it. Otherwise, there really isn't much point. And it leads me on to another point. We're talking about the coming season, and we will go back to the wider issue in a minute. But I did want to touch on this. That we're going into the season with very, very low expectations, but also a football team doesn't need to be jammed full of household names, big transfers, massive wages. even experience to be successful sometimes, or even enjoyable or entertaining. Sometimes a lean, taut team who is potentially up against it a little bit with no expectation, well, I dare say we'll go into the first game as massive outsiders away against Millwall, but professional football is sometimes like that, and they react well. There's a chance for youth coming through. There's potential for players like Grado Barr, who have been in and around the club, who look like they're going to get their opportunity. Look, I'm certainly not saying it's definitely going to be fun, but there is also a possibility that teams do knit together from when you least expect it, and you have to at least have that kernel of hope and not expectation, and you've got to have a reason to go. You've got to have a reason to enjoy it, and they might be all right. They might be good, and ultimately they'll still go out wearing our badge, and hopefully everyone who has Watford in their heart can find something that was going to make them go to Vicarage Road or the Den on the opening day, and just carry on enjoying it. But who knows what this team might end up doing? Doesn't look good.
No, well, no, we'll talk about what this season might look like a little bit later on. But Dave, there is this point where we, as what we do with this podcast, we've done it for our 15th season now, where we do probably pay a bit more attention to what's going on. We're not going out there searching for stuff. Talk to people, they talk to us, and I don't know, we're paying more attention. Maybe able to do it a bit more because of social media and what have you. But when we're at this point now, and we have, been out there with the buckets, Watford fans before, what can we do? What is it that we should do? Should we just turn up and support and come up with some new chants and sing those as loud as possible? Is that all we can or should do?
I mean, at the moment, I think we're all, as demonstrated by having this conversation, we're aware of the issues. We've got to do our best to, I say, hold Gino to account, but it is difficult. And, look, Andrew French wrote his big piece for the Watford Observer the other day, kind of saying this sort of thing, that, the supporters of the club have got to demand that we hear from Gino. Look, we did that a year ago. We heard from him and didn't say much, and nothing's changed, and if anything, it's got worse, right? So, but the spirit of that sentiment is nevertheless correct. We should, if we're unhappy and if we're deeply concerned about the football club, about the way it's being run and the future of it, we should use our voices as fans to raise our concerns. I would like to see a more vocal supporters trust. I don't know the people that run that. I've had no involvement in it, so I don't want to presume anything about them. But I'm not aware of their activities really, which maybe that says something in itself. I think they could have an important role going forward in the club. Some people talk about protests and stuff. What exactly are you protesting? How's that going to take shape? You've got to think about these things very carefully. I don't think we're there yet. Really, I don't think we're at the tennis balls on the pitch moment just yet, or whatever else we choose to throw on the pitch or whatever. Can't throw your season ticket on the pitch anymore.
Oh, we're fine.
but I think we've got to be switched on. We've got to be aware, and we've got to be ready to try and do what we can if the moment comes to be actively engaged in the football club from that perspective.
Yeah, I think you mentioned protests there, and there has been talk, or at least sort of whispers about wanting to protest. And
is that more just one of those things that someone can say something on social media and it can feel like it's a movement, but it's not really a movement?
No, I think what it is trying to articulate that you want to do something. We're sort of relatively lucky in as much as we can sit and get this off our chests and put it out in the world and have conversations about it via the medium of our podcast. And other people haven't got that opportunity, and I entirely. So before I was outlining a doomsday scenario. If you think that's going to happen, I fully understand why you want to protest. Dave made a good point about what does that protest look like. We know full well how hard it is to organise something with a united front. We tried to do the Gino event, which on the face of it should have been...
We did do it, Michael. We did do it. Didn't try to. We did do it.
It should have been pretty straightforward. Yeah. Random ballot, ask the questions you want, and the whole thing's going to be recorded. Shouldn't be that hard, but we were met with problems and issues at every single turn from people that you wouldn't necessarily expect it. So organising stuff as fans, and as whether you like it or not, fans are seen in different ways. we're seen by some as having elite privileges for the club. I don't know what they are, and can't wait to find out what they are, and therefore we're scared to speak out. That's how some people view us. That's absolutely fine. But there are perceived silos of fans, or whatever you want to call it. So getting everyone to come together to do something in unison is tough. It's not to say it's impossible, but there's two things. What does that protest look like? And the other thing is, Gino doesn't care.
No.
He does not give a flying stuff what I say, what Dave says, what John says, whether it's 3 of us, whether it's 3,000 of us, whether it's 5,000 of us. He's not bothered. That much is obvious, because otherwise some of the stuff that happens wouldn't happen. So I would urge you, I think Dave's absolutely on the money there. We've said how tough it is to combine fans together. They need a banner to do it underneath. It's the trust. So if you are moved to get involved, if you are moved to want to put your shoulder to the wheel, because the other thing is, getting involved and making things happen is hard, it's time consuming, it's emotionally consuming. But if you do want to do that, if you are moved to want to make a difference, Dave made the point, he's unsure what the trust are doing. Ask them what they are doing, and ask how you can help.
That's the important bit, because you can sign up for it and do very little. You can sign up for it and just expect them to do everything, but actually, to truly do things properly, you have to sign up for it and ask that question: how can I help?
Yeah, it's a proper organisation with it's got a board, and it's a proper, and it's completely independent. It's not if you've got a favourite podcast or a favourite fanzine, or you don't like me because I'm a lefty woke liberal, then you don't have to worry about it. They're all under the same Watford banner. So ask and see what you can do to get involved. But again, it goes back to that thing: what's it going to look like, and what impact is it going to have on Gino? And I think having frank discussions about what you're worried about. It's helped me already this evening, sort of talking about it in the open. Light is the best disinfectant. So actually, if supporters are talking sensibly and proactively about what they're worried about, what's stopping Scott or even Gino from allaying those fears?
They don't have to give us the answer. They don't have to say, this is what we're going to do to get us out of it. They have to say, look, it's almost like acknowledging where we are and what we are.
I said a minute ago, I'm not sure we're at the point of protest yet, and I'm not sure what it would be and when we would do it. But thinking about it, for me, the line in the sand and the moment that we would need to shift gears in terms of our engagement and sort of activism, if you like, as a supporters base, would be if we arrive at a situation this season where the players or indeed the employees of the club aren't paid. Because I think that is a big moment, and that is always a sort of marker in these crisis clubs. You've seen it with Derby not too long ago, and plenty of other clubs. It's not uncommon for the wage bill to be the real tipping point. The money runs out, and what's the biggest outgoing that any football club has? The wages of the players. Again, I include the staff in that as well, because they're paid a lot less, but they need the money a lot more. But if and I hope we don't come to this, but reading between the lines and looking at the accounts and kind of adding all the numbers up in your head, you think it's fairly realistic that there could be a scenario, if we don't make the money we need to make, that would be the first thing to go. If there was a time that this season or beyond where wages are not paid, I think that is when you have to go, right, that's not good enough, we've got to do something.
And similarly, I think you're right, Dave. I think it's a really good blueprint is to look what goes wrong at other clubs. And there's those 4 letters, isn't there? HMRC. That Southend have managed to drag themselves back from the precipice through an extraordinarily elongated and messy takeover, but they've been winding up petition after winding up petition. This is what I mean about it being a slippery slope. If you can't arrest the decline, then you end up robbing Peter to pay Paul, and things slip through the cracks. Things don't get paid, and then of course, if you don't pay what you're due on transfer fees, you're looking at transfer embargoes, which then exacerbates everything else. Now, of course, I'm not saying any of these things have or will happen, but we've seen them happen Dave listed just a few of them earlier, and there are countless others where these have been the things that ultimately, finally, drag you down into the quicksand, and it's very, very hard to get out. You just have to keep talking about it. We just have to be aware. That's not true. You don't have to be. If you want to turn up at 5-3, watch the game, go home and enjoy it, that is as fine as wanting to join the trust and wanting to organise a protest or anything else. There is no right or wrong way to do this. But if you are engaged and you are, I guess, concerned, then there are telltale signs to look out for. What are the pitfalls that other clubs have fallen headfirst into? And we can use them and say that that's not accusatory. That's saying we've seen what's happened to other clubs. What can you do to allay our fears that that's not going to happen to us? And if you're running the club properly, and if there aren't concerns, you just say, well, it's fine, because you'll see in the accounts this, this and this. We've taken this measure and done that. People don't have to be aware. I want to remain as aware as possible and carry on the conversation in the hope that their clubs see fit to allay those fears. And if they don't, and if that communication sort of, I don't expect Gino to talk. I don't think many owners do a very good job at it. But hearing from the top is helpful sometimes, and hearing stuff that's different. I asked a question at that fans forum. I asked them, where's the introspection? I said, there's no sign that you guys are recognising that you've done anything wrong, that you need to change. And there's some bluster about, well, we're trying this, we're doing this.
Well, that we do do it, but you know, you can't see it.
And I pushed them on it again. I said, well, where's the sign of the change? And if we want to have our fears allayed that things are actually going to move upwards, then something needs to change. Whether it's the way they run it, whether it's the way they talk, whatever. Because at the moment, my comprehensive belief is that things are going to get significantly worse before they get better, unless something changes drastically. For things to get better, we're going to have to hit rock bottom, and I don't think we're anywhere near there yet.
Okay, now you know me. 14 years of doing this, I'm not going to let us feel or end on a low. So let's look ahead to the season. Let's imagine, not the club, the football. What is it, Dave, that's going to happen on one of your Saturdays, /Fridays, /Saturday lunchtimes, whenever it's going to happen? What's the thing you're going to see that's going to put the biggest smile on your face? Can you put it down to one person even?
Well, look, I would love it if we turned up at the Den on the first day of the season on a sunny Saturday in August and we came back with 3 points and absolutely battered them. Because I've been to the Millwall away game for the last few years, and it's been in the dead of winter, and we have been absolutely battered, not in scoreline, but in the physical sense on the pitch. I mean, it's been chastening experience more than one occasion. So I think it's a good time to play them, actually. I think first day, get it out of the way. It should be a nice day in London. A few beers by the Thames afterwards, because it's an early kick-off. And hopefully, we did beat them, like, what was it, 6-0, 6-1?
I think that was in our first season. That's 15 years ago.
Well, there we go. It's written in the stars. It's going to happen, the 15-year anniversary. And, you know, that would be great. But I think it is going to be a difficult season. You talked about the expectations of the team changing in that 90s podcast. And I think, again, that's where we're at now. For me, especially, because I think in the last few years, you guys have probably been managing your own expectations a little bit better than I have. I've always been clinging on to the distant hope that maybe if we just win this game and win that game, we can still get in the playoffs. Obviously, it just hasn't been anywhere near the last few years. But that has still been my mindset, has been, if everything goes right, we've got this player and that player. Like even last season under Valerian Ismail, there was a time when I thought, oh, you know what, we could do it. And maybe at one time that was a reasonable thing to think, because we weren't actually that far away from the playoffs, 1 point in it or whatever it was. But now I have fully adjusted my expectations. Anything above staying in the division is a success. Staying in the division is a success for us this season, I think. With the squad that we've got at the moment, we might bring a few more players in. There's been talks that left back who was at Sheffield United is going to come in, and there'll be one or two. There just will be. We'll find, Moji will pick someone up from somewhere, and we'll have him in the team, right? That's how it goes. But the squad at the moment looks worse than it was last season. Last season we stayed up basically by virtue of beating Birmingham. We stayed up by 6 points, and Birmingham were the last team that went down. So we have to ready ourselves for a tough season. We've got a manager in Tom Cleverley who obviously lacks experience, and very difficult to tell what sort of manager he's going to be based off that small sample size last season when he was really just getting us to the end of the season. It's a big test for him. I'm excited for him. I really hope it goes well for him, but he's got very little to work with. We've seen the issues in pre-season already. It's not been a good pre-season, and you can ignore pre-season results, but you can see some problems that he's going to have to deal with. Looks like he's going to play 3 at the back. It's going to maybe be sort of high-pressing football. Might be quite fun to watch. And the other thing is that we talk about, the squad being demonstrably poorer. It's poorer at the moment, but it could be so much poorer by the time we get to the end of the transfer window. Asprilla could easily go. Hoot could easily go. Last night's injury permitting. Loser could go. Chakvetadze could go as well. We could be without those 4 players, and because of everything we've talked about on this pod, financially, it's not like we were going to be able to reinvest all of that money back into the team. Obviously, we'd have to bring in some players, literally just to have a full squad, but their quality would definitely be lower. If you're Tom Cleverley, you must be really concerned about the makeup of the squad and indeed what it might look like come the end of the transfer window. It's going to be tough for him, but we have to, I think, on a match day at least, just try and enjoy it, try and support the team and get what we can out of it.
That's a very in-depth answer, Dave. I was just going to say the black kit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that black kit. Also, two fixtures. I mean, finally we can play Luton without worrying about it, because we're the underdogs. Yeah. At long last, after 345 years, Luton are going into these games as favourites. So if we could turn those over, that would be absolutely magnificent. Because they are lording it over us at the moment. When I tweet about how bad we are, all of a sudden I'm getting likes from up the M1. A part of me, going back to that 90s thing, how amazing would it be to stay up on the last day?
Yeah, I know.
Scramble a last-minute winner. They talked about the Peterborough game. That wasn't quite the last day, but that Terrace in the 90s against Peterborough, it was a must-win game. It was effectively do or die. We were locked in a relegation battle. Watford won 4-3, and I was with Dave at England v Germany in the Euros. I've been in some sensational atmospheres, but that was unhinged. It was absolutely... Anyone that was there will know exactly what I'm talking about. And just to have that moment, perhaps that's worth more staying in the division than anything else, perhaps. And because you'd have scrapped all season. Yeah. You'd have had to work all season, and then for the last, to do it at the last minute. I hope it doesn't come to that.
But that's a good feeling. I know what you mean. I was remembering the season before we started this, the end of the first Malcolm Mackay season, we had 3-0 home win against Reading. And I think that was one of my favourite days because, like you say, it does mean a little bit more.
Oh, no.
What?
Oh, no, I've just looked at the fixture list.
Go on.
We're at home to Sheffield Wednesday on the last day.
Retribution.
We'll go out the weekend before that. We'll stay out the weekend before that. I'm looking forward to...
It'll be 10 years as well, won't it? It'll be 10 years since that's happened, since that day where we...
And it'll be revenge. It'll be revenge. They'll be going down. That's the thing.
So cross. And I ended up getting so drunk that evening. But yeah, okay, well, revenge will be sweet, won't it, Dave? Yeah. We'll get a last minute win. I'll tell you what, we stay up and they go down.
Can we sign Addi Nuhi?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
on loan for the last half of the season.
Yeah, you joke.
My thing with this season, I want to get my new favourite Watford player and to be a homegrown little lad. I call them little lads now because I'm quite old. But is it Ramirez Ispan? How do you say it?
I hope he turns out to be a good footballer because his haircut. I mean, obviously I'm bald, so I can't really. His hair looks ludicrous, so I really hope for his sake he's a good footballer.
I think there will be enough exciting things, and like you say, we will keep coming back to this. We're not going to make it the thing that's part of every single podcast when we chat about the games, because we're going to do match day podcasts after every single game, and then we're going to do our away day podcast as well, where basically we don't have to worry about the games. We can have fun talking as Watford fans, sort of like we did last week with the guys from the Treasury about the 1990s, our draft podcast we did a couple of weeks ago. The feedback from that, Mike, I think the winners, unfortunately, for both of you, seems to be it was Jason and Kieran with their team, the Vicarage Balls.
I mean, it's a nonsense.
It is absolute nonsense.
It's a palpable nonsense. Our team was by far the best. I mean, Dave you might as well go to the bar and get the beers in, mate. We're not going to talk to you after that size you put together. It's an absolute shambles.
It wasn't much a shambles of the team that you put together the previous draft, Mike.
Take it. No, I'm not having it.
Thank you very much for listening to these 3 pre-season podcasts. We're back after the Millwall game to see how things are starting to pan out. Even though we are only 3 weeks left of the after that game of the transfer window. It's another season of From the Rookery End, and we'll be there the whole way. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. I think it is important to stress that we're not going to drone on like a bunch of miseries the whole time, but we're not going to let this go. This is the reality of our football club, and we will revisit it in ways that when we get the opportunity and when we're able to add and move the thing forward, move the debate forward. This isn't a one and done. It's our football club, and everything that we said we mean, and I'm desperate for us to do whatever we can to ultimately safeguard the future of this thing that we love so much.
Thank you very much. Come on, you Orns.
Come on, you Orns.